Hello again. This video is going to be relatively short. This is going to be a kind of a follow-up to a video I did on first editions, and I'm just going to follow up on that. It's probably going to be a continuing series. We're still working on more modern editions. Eventually we're going to look at older books, and those can be harder to identify. But I just want to give you some tips. Here's a book, All the Light We Cannot See. This book was a big bestseller, kind of a popular book. So much so that it's got some stickers on it. 10 Best Books, New York Times Book Review, National Book Award finalist. Well, I don't even have to open this book up. I know that probably it's not a first edition because these awards wouldn't have been given out till after the book was out for a while. Well, let's look inside. And you probably can't see it, but it has a number line. And the lowest number is 27. So that means this is a 27th printing. I don't know how many printings this book went to, but 27 is quite a bit. And that's a testimony to the fact that how good the book was. And that's something you should keep in mind for any book. While you don't, if you're collecting first editions, you may not want a 27th printing. That just really highlights the value of the original first edition. There are times when books don't even go to a second edition. That's something a lot of collectors don't like to talk about, and they'll hype up their book as a first edition, but when really it never even went to a second edition, and so that has a big factor. Here's a really popular book, The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, and it's a winner of the National Book Award. And again, you see that sticker on there. That's an indication it's probably not a first edition. But here's where things get kind of tricky. Well, it's going to be hard for you to see, but I want to show you here if I can get to the page. Yeah, right here. Right up here it says first edition, September 2007. Someone's going to see that and they're going to think, whoa, Nellie, it's a first edition. That's not true. If you look way down here, there's a number line, and the lowest number is 16. So this is a 16th printing. Someone might say, no, it's not. It's clearly marked, stated, first edition. Quite often people like to use the term stated. And while that's important, in this case, it doesn't hold a lot of meaning. So why is that? Why does it say first edition way up here, and we know down here that it's a 16th printing? The whole point of these number lines was to make it easier for the publishers to drop numbers off on subsequent printings to keep track of the printings. Sections like this, first edition, they would leave intact. And when this goes to the next printing, no matter how many printings it goes to, it's going to say first edition there. So that's something to keep in mind. Always remember to look at the number line. Again, older books, it's a little more difficult, but don't trust that. Quite often, especially if you're buying a book online, it wouldn't be a bit unusual for them to have a picture of this page highlighting this first edition, selling the book as a first edition. And then lo and behold, they'll have a picture of the front of the book with this book award on there. Well, that's just, those two things don't go together. That should be a warning flag. Here's a different book. This is Hunter Thompson's Hell's Angels. And sometimes first editions can be difficult to tell. Having an unclipped jacket is really helpful. Up here it says first printing. It doesn't say first edition anywhere, so that might leave us kind of like wondering, is this a true first edition? Well, sometimes you have to do a little bit more research, and if you have a bibliography of the author, obviously that's ideal, but that's not always possible. Fortunately, in the case of Hunter Thompson, there's an actual website you can go to that will help you identify his first editions. And one of the first things you look for, see this is white, on the top of the book, the paper is colored black. That is a bigger clue that this is a first edition than anything else about this book. So that's a helpful. Here's a book here. This is Michener's Space. We're going to look this up and see what's going on here. And this book says, again, it's the first edition, and the lowest number is a 2. So this is a second printing, not a first printing of the book. Also, if you haven't already noticed, this book is in really rough condition. Not a first edition, no dust jacket, and I don't know what happened to it, but it doesn't look good. A book like this doesn't hold a whole lot of value outside of just a book to read. So that's where condition comes into play. There are other factors that come into play too, though. Some that you might not realize until you dig a little deeper. Here's a first edition copy of Visionary Film. Great book, highly recommended. And certainly nice to have a first edition of that copy. Here's the same book, the second edition. Okay, so you might think, well, I'd want to have the first edition, and you would want to have the first edition. But this is the thing. Sometimes the book's content will change. And without getting into the weeds and explaining why, in the second edition, a whole chapter was taken out of this book on Gregory Markopoulos, more or less at his request. So if you're interested in his work, certainly you might want the first edition just for that reason alone. And while unusual, it's not uncommon to see things like that in books. Again, something to be aware of. Likewise, what's even more common is in a later edition of a book, usually, especially a nonfiction book, they may add content. And that may make the book more desirable. And you might just want to have a first edition just for bragging rights. When really, if you're going to read the book, you might end up finding yourself reading the older edition. And that's going to be all today for the first editions. And I hope this is helping you out some. And again, if you have any questions, ideas for future videos, please let me know, because we're open to anything. Thanks.